Welcome to Italian Bottles and Bites, the podcast where we uncork Italy's finest wines and savor the stories behind its irresistible cuisine. Rob is your host, here to guide you through a journey of flavors, culture, and traditions of Italy. Every week, we'll explore the vineyards, kitchens, and markets that make Italy a food and wine lover's paradise. So pour yourself a glass, grab a bite, and let's embark on this delicious adventure together. This is Italian Bottles and Bites.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks for stopping by. We are talking white wines today, white wines of Italy. And I will say, just to start off, in my opinion, the greatest country on the globe for drinking white wines as a category, white wine as a category. I'm not here to tell you that they have the greatest singular white wine, but I think from the north to the south, the white wines of Italy, if I had to drink white wine from one country for the rest of my life, Italy's my choice, and it's not even close. It's a no-brainer for me. And we're going to talk a little bit about why I think this. And, if you're not drinking white wines in general, but specifically the white wines of Italy, if you're not exploring the grapes of Italy, because, overall, Italy has over 300 indigenous grapes, and probably half to more than half of those are white wine grapes. So there's a lot of exploring to do in Italy in the world of white wine. So when you think about Italy, I think the first thing you want to talk about or think about is the terroir, right? When we think of Italy, we often picture, kind of rolling hills covered in vineyards, steep cliffs by the sea, when you think about the Amalfi Coast and thing, sun-soaked valleys, these beaches on the coastlines and things like that. These varied landscapes are what make Italian wines, right? Particularly white wines. And it's actually what makes them so special. When you think about Italy and you go from the north, you're up there in that cool alpine influenced, area in the north. Those vineyards get a lot of cool temperature. When you think about the Alps, you got these mountains, you can get some elevation. And then you go all the way down to the sunny shores of the south that are right down there by the Mediterranean. So Italy's geography offers a huge range of microclimates that help shape the profiles of its wines. And you think of the crisp, mineral-driven whites from the northern regions of Alto Adige and Friuli, or the most robust, sun-kissed whites from Sicily or Sardinia. The geography, combined with the ancient winemaking traditions, creates a perfect environment for crafting world-class white wines. And Italy does this, really, really well. We're going to talk today a little bit about the grapes, right? We're going to talk about 5 grapes in particular. And as you heard me say a moment ago, there's hundreds. And, as this podcast continues to have episodes, a lot of it will be covering the white wines of Italy, the white grapes of Italy. But for today's show, we want to just kind of touch on some grapes that kind of give you a sense of what Italy is when it comes to white wine, how these wines kind of give you a sense of Italy, a sense of place, and how diverse and different it can be for all these regions with these wines. So some of the varieties that we're going to talk about are known internationally, while others, kind of are secrets of the home regions. Or if you're, a wine geek or wine nerd, kind of like me, and you love to explore, you might have had or tried or heard of a few of the grapes that we're going to talk about today. And let's go into kind of the first grape. And this is what, I think everybody who's had a glass of white wine or had a glass of wine for that matter has heard this wine, this grape. And it's Pinot Grigio. In Italy, it's Pinot Grigio. In France, it's Pinot Gris. This is probably one of the most popular, probably the most popular Italian white wines worldwide. It's grown in regions in the Veneto, in Friuli, This grape produces light, crisp wines with refreshing citrus. Got some apple notes, some green apple notes. It's the perfect companion if you're having, a light pasta with seafood, or just on a summer day. Go with the salad. A light salad would be good pairing with this. But here's my issue. You heard me mention the two regions, Veneto and Friuli. This is where you want to get these wines from. You got to search out and find some good producers. But Pinot Grigio, I think, for a lot of us in the wine world who are nerds, think of it as being somewhat simplistic, right? Single noted, not a lot going on. And that can be true from wines throughout Italy, from Pinot Grigio. But when you get to the Veneto and you get up into Friuli, these regions take this wine grape very seriously. And when you put some attention to it and you give it some love and you give it some thought on how this wine, this grape can make great wine, that's exactly what happens. You get great wine. I'll tell you, for the longest time, I was not a fan of Pinot Grigio. Some Pinot Gris I absolutely liked from Alsace, and there's some from Oregon that are pretty good. But Pinot Grigio, I hadn't found any that I'd really thought were worthy, that made me kind of sit back and go, hold on, wait a second, this is pretty good, until I got into Alto Adige and then into Friuli. These regions really produce some fantastic versions of what this wine can be from this grape. So if you're going to go look for Pinot Grigio in Italy, and I think you should, you want to start up north in the Veneto and Friuli. So definitely make sure you do that. The next grape we're going to talk about on our list is Verdicchio. Verdicchio is a grape that originates from the Marche region, Marche. I never know if I'm saying these things right. My pronunciation on words in general, even the English language, can be brutal. But when we get into some other foreign language, it gets even worse. So bear with me. Verdicchio wines are typically dry. They do have pretty good acidity. They have a hint of sometimes nuts, almonds specifically, and you can get some citrus on these. Now, I will say there are times these quality wines of Verdicchio can age a little bit. They can be more complex. They can be full-bodied. So something to consider. A lot of times we hear white wines can't age or shouldn't age. There are exceptions. I think as a general rule, that's fair. But I think there's always exceptions to rules. And Verdicchio, some of the offerings can be age-worthy. So something that we want to remember. So that's the second wine that we're going to talk about, Verdicchio, the wine grape. That's, again, we're talking about five wines that are going to give you, five grapes that are going to give you this sense of place. And by the way, that's very, very important to talk about and just kind of quickly mention. When you're drinking wine, you should get this sense of place. It should be unique to its terroir, right? Its sense, its place where it comes from, and terroir is just all the elements that make up the conditions that grape is grown in. So it's from the soil to the amount of sunlight to the temperature, the average temperature. All of these things play into what we call terroir to get the conditions of growing these grapes. And, I learned that from a friend of mine who's been on the show a few times, Bob Polinsky, Master of Wine. It's one of his critical components in grading a wine is, do I get a sense of place from this expression? Can I go, okay, this comes from, this place, and I see that. Even if you don't, if you're doing it blind, you don't pick it up. Once you kind of know what the wine is, do you then know what to look for to get that sense of place, and do you find it? I think that's very, very important, and I think Italy does a fantastic job of doing that. The next wine on our list of the five we're going to talk about today is Fiano. Fiano is, I'm going to tell you right now, we're talking five wines to give you this kind of introduction to what Italy can be, kind of the different terroirs and microclimates and regions that you can get wine from, cooler climates to warmer climates. But I'm going to tell you, Fiano's one of the five that would be on my top 5 white wines of Italy. The other 4 would not be. And I'm just saying that as a little teaser because we're going to have an upcoming episode where I'll have some friends on, some wine geeks on, and we're going to talk about our top 5 white wines of Italy. And I'm just a little teaser that the other 4 that we're talking about aren't even on my list. That's how good the white wines of Italy are. So Fiano, where is this from? Well, it's from southern Italy. We're going to move down the coast a little bit. It's predominantly found in Campania region, which is kind of southeast of Lazio, where Rome is, and that's really where these wines shine. Fiano. These wines are very aromatic. They're complex. They have flavors of honey, citrus, sometimes a touch of herb, good acidity. The best examples of these wines for me come from Fiano de Avellino, and they often have a slight richness that makes them perfect for pairing with seafood or even oven-roasted vegetables, things like that. So it's a fantastic. I'll tell you, this wine is so good that Australia has, come over and said, hey, we want to adopt you and see what we can do with you in Australia, because they're making some great Fianos as well. And that's imitation, they say, is the nicest form, of flattery, right? When you take another grape, an indigenous grape from a country, and you try to do something with it, somewhere else, that to me is the nicest, form of flattery to a wine grape. You're saying that grape is so good. What can we do with that here? And they're doing that with Fiano. Fiano's one of my favorite grapes. Absolutely is. Greco. Greco's another grape that you should know about. And this also is in that Campania area. One of the most iconic expressions of this wine is Greco de Tufo, Tufo. See, again, I'm going to butcher this, the pronunciation. Greco de Tufo from Campania is, one of the best known expressions of this wine. And this is a grape that produces a wine that can be, really aromatic. It can have some minerality to it as well. Not only is it in Campania, it can be down in Calabria as well. Greco wines are there. These wines can be very vibrant with citrus, some green apple, sometimes a hint of tropical fruit. If it's a little warmer vintage, you might get that tropical fruit on it. But another wine that you should seek out and try if you haven't explored a lot of white wines in Italy, just to get an idea of what white wines can be in Italy. And I just want to say, as a general kind of statement, white wines are here, man. And I say that because as a dude, I'm doing my podcast. I love talking about wines. I will admit, I have no problem admitting this. I haven't always been a lover of white wine. Not until recently, and I say recently, about probably 3 or 4 years ago, did I really get on the bandwagon of white wines and really seeing how good they are and can be. And I remember having lunch with a friend of mine, Jeremy Hart, a wine guy in the industry here in town, and we went to a place and had some lunch. And as we were talking, the conversation, he brought a bottle of white wine. It was a BYOB place, and he bought a bottle of white wine, and we were enjoying it. And he asked me what I thought about white wine. I was like, it's all right. It's not my greatest thing, whatever. I'll drink a glass, but that's about it. And he said, man, I'm telling you, in a few years, you're going to come back and tell me how much you like white wine. I go, nah, I'm not sure I'll do that. And he goes, I'm telling you, you're into wine so much that you can't help yourself. You're going to find out how good it can be. And I'll tell you, I'm there. I have arrived a few years ago. White wine, I will tell you, we drink it probably when we open a bottle of wine, 75% of the time, it's a white wine. And from all over the world, but white wines are great. If you're not into them and exploring and enjoying the different white wines, you need to be, but specifically Italy as well. So Greco, great wine grape from the Campania and Calabria region of Italy. And then we're going to talk about our last grape for the 5 that will give you kind of a sense of what Italy is and can be with white wines. And these are grapes that are also known, around the globe a little bit. Trebbiano. Trebbiano's, one of Italy's most widely planted grapes. It's often used in both still wines and sparkling wines. It's known for being, very crisp and light. It has a subtle fruitiness to it, while often considered, kind of this workhorse grape, because they use it in a lot of different ways. It really is known as the white wine of like Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna, where it pairs perfectly with local dishes like pasta and light sauces and even, some cheeses and things like that. So Trebbiano is a great grape. I don't want to tell you, what you should think about it, but I think you should try it for sure. For sure. And understand trying it from different regions because styles matter. I mentioned Tuscany, I mentioned Emilia Romagna. Try it from different regions and see what you think because there's a lot of regions that do Trebbiano and they have a different style and a different take on it. And it's kind of fun to see, where it might be the most well-known for being the grape of that region might not be your favorite place to drink it from. And there's nothing wrong with that. So my point is if you try it in Tuscany or Emilia Romagna and you don't like it, don't give up on it. Go to another region, give it another shot. It's just like, Cabernet Sauvignon from Napa Valley. You try it once from one producer, you go, I don't like it. The next 3 producers you have, you absolutely love it. So, that's the world of wine. Keep exploring. So let's talk about, why the art of winemaking in Italy is so successful. Why do they do such a good job? To me, when I look at Italy, I don't think about them. Do they make fantastic wines? Yes. Why do they make fantastic wines? I don't think of Italy as just chasing a buck. I'll be honest. A lot of times in the States, Napa and primarily Napa, in some other regions that are up and coming in the United States, the prices are absolutely crazy. And, it's always thought that the wines of your country, wherever you are, you should buy those wines because they should be the most, economical wines that you can get. And it's just not the case in the States. I say that to say, I don't think Italians are making wine. They're making wine and selling it to make money. Of course they are. But they deeply, deeply care about the quality that they're producing, with their wines, the tradition, Italy's winemaking tradition. I mean, it goes back a long, long time. I mean, we're talking back to the Romans, right? And having this long history gives Italian winemakers, this huge knowledge, this huge, long tradition of how to craft wines that, express the unique characters of all their regions. And let's not forget, Italy is a very young country, only been in existence less than 150 years. I mean, it started the process of becoming a country in like 1861. And I think it was finally unified and final in 1871. So, you think about the United States as being a young country. Well, we're 100 years older than Italy. And I think a lot of people, if they think about that, don't realize that. So very young country. And when you think about the 20 regions of Italy prior to their unification, they are very diverse and different. And so, all of these let me say it this way, being very diverse and different, they all still have that very long history and tradition because the Romans were all up in that region, right? And had the influence of winemaking. So they still have been making wine, using these techniques for lots of years, hundreds of years. So today, many producers still prioritize traditional techniques, such as, fermentation in stainless steel or using large oak barrels. And this, can help maintain the fresh and crisp qualities of white wines. So I think that's very important that, that there's this long tradition and history of winemaking, but not just the history and passing it down, but the pride. There's a lot of pride in Italy of making, great wine. I'll also say that about their food. They take their wine and food very seriously. And it shows when you experience their wine and their food on a plate. It's outstanding. Now, one of the things I like about white wines of Italy is, well, white wines in general, but specifically Italy, they're so diverse that when you talk about, pairing wine with food, I would say, in my opinion, white wines go with more foods than red wines go with food. They just do. And, one of the things that make white wines so special is their incredible versatility when it comes to, pairing them with food. Italian cuisine is, very diverse, like we talked about, from all the regions that we've talked about, 20 of them. And these wines are often crafted, with an eye towards complementing their local dishes. We've always heard them say, what grows together goes together. And the foods that people eat in these regions, they make wines in a style that complement those foods. So very, very important that this is something that's thought of. This is something on the minds of the winemakers when they're doing this and having these, making these wines. Now, why do they go so well with food? Well, Italian wines have always been thought to have very lively acidity, and having good acidity in a wine, whether it's white or red, really helps with it being food friendly. Makes them very refreshing, helps cleanse the palate as you take bites. So the acidity helps balance, the fruitiness of the wines, but gives them the ability sometimes to age well as well, especially for the varieties like we talked about with Verdicchio and even a Fiano for that matter. So quality in the balance of a wine, the acidity and the freshness of a wine that pair with a variety of types of dishes and foods is very important to a lot of the Italian winemakers. So I think that's something that you need to obviously, know about and be aware of as you explore white wines of Italy. There's a purpose behind them. They're not, can they be a porch pounder? Can they be out by the pool? Yeah, sure. But can they also be, enjoyed with food? And absolutely. And I would say that's what they're meant for. One of the other things I'd like to talk about as we talk about, the white wines and the grapes that I've mentioned and those regions that they come from. And as you heard me say, there are hundreds of varieties of grapes that make white wine. You need to explore Italy, and we're going to do some more shows on this, but what I do want to kind of mention 3 regions that I have enjoyed immensely over the last year and a half for white wine. Reds as well, but specifically white wine. And, these are innovative wine regions. A lot of them like Tuscany and the Veneto, and when you think about Piemonte, these are very well-known wine regions, around the globe. But I'll bet money that if you asked a friend that drinks wine casually, if they've heard of 2 of the 3 that I'm going to mention, they probably haven't. And the first one I'm going to mention for being exceptional for winemaking, it's up in the north, and it's a region called Alto Adige. Makes some absolutely stunning, beautiful wines. So very, high acidic wines, mineral-driven white wines. And this is a place that if I'm going to drink Pinot Grigio, that's where I'm drinking it from. There, or the next region I'm going to mention, which is also up in this area, which is Friuli. Friuli is also great and makes some fantastic white wines. And again, both of these regions make some good red wines. I'm mentioning Pinot Grigio because that's kind of the grape that was mentioned in the 5 that we're talking about today. I will tell you there will be future episodes to talk about some very cool grapes that are indigenous or that were created. How do I want to say it? Bred to these areas that are absolutely delicious. So we'll get into some of those grapes from these regions as well. The third one after Alto Adige and Friuli, you got to go all the way down south. Now we're going down to the island of Sicily, and you think about Mount Etna, and that's where we're going to have Etna Bianco. Now, Etna Bianco, and it's Mount Etna, It's a mountain. It's actually a volcano, an active volcano. But that's where you get some of this really cool soil that influences, what you get in the bottle. The grape here, the white wine that's predominantly used, the white grape that's predominantly used is Caricante. There is some Grecanico. I don't know how, again, butchering the language. Grecanico or something, Grecanico that's in this as well, that can be blended in with the Caricante. This is the signature grape for white wines in the Etna region. It's known for having just really high acidity, citrus notes, and some mineral qualities. And I'll tell you, a lot of people will sometimes compare the Etna Bianco to like a white wine, a Chardonnay from Chablis, which I think is a very fair comparison because they both have that, that citrus, that high acidity, the mineral notes that you can get, a little bit of stone fruit, some green apple. So it's a very fair comparison. Now, you heard me say that the volcanic soils on Mount Etna, which, that gives them a very unique environment for vine growth because, it's not very often that you see vineyards on an active volcano. These soils are rich with minerals and organic matter. And like I said earlier, it contributes to the wine's, complexity, the freshness, that minerality that you get in the bottle and in the glass. You can get, vineyards that are 400 meters above sea level. It's like 1,300 feet all the way up to 1,000 meters, which is 3,200 feet above sea level. The high altitude conditions, obviously give you cooler temperatures, which help when you're doing wine. Cooler temperatures preserve the acidity, lessen the alcohol, and give you kind of a more vibrant character in the wine, which is what I love in wines. I'm not big into that tropical fruit types, hot region style wines. I'm more into the complexity, the minerality, and the acidity of wines is what really turns me on to them. But Sicily with Mount Etna is a region that you'll hear us on this podcast talking about a lot, and we'll do some special shows on it to highlight it because it is a great white wine. I think you're going to see in the world of wines, it's going to continue to grow in stature. I think you're going to start to see people really coming after these wines. And I'm saying it to say, start enjoying now. Right now, this region is still very reasonable. But like any wine region, capitalism, when there's a higher demand for what you're offering, then the price goes up. I mean, people would just pay it. So I would suggest go try and enjoy these wines right now for as long as you can, because these prices are going to go up. And as they go up and people start shopping, they may become harder and harder to get because the production here is not huge. So just be aware of that as well. I will also say about Mount Etna, when you think about Italy, you think about regions like Burgundy. You think, okay, the white wine in Burgundy is Chardonnay. The red wine is Pinot Noir. If you go to Bordeaux, the white wine is going to be Semillon or Sauvignon Blanc. The red wine is, the Bordeaux blend of those grapes, those 6 grapes. Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cab Franc, you get it. If you go to Loire Valley, you're going to think about, Sancerre, which is Sauvignon Blanc. And then, the red grape, typically it's known for Cab Franc. There is some Pinot Noir there as well. My point is, a lot of places have a red and a red and a white that's kind of their signature wines for that region. If you think about Italy, Mount Etna is really the only region that kind of has that. You have an Etna Rosso and an Etna Bianco. So you have the Etna Red and the Etna White. That is very well known, those 2 wines from that region, which if you think about Tuscany, I think you could think Chiantis, you could think Brunellos, Vino Nobile de Montepulcianos, but I don't think you go, and the white wine that goes with that is this. There isn't one. There really isn't. And not that I'm aware of. I mean, somebody tell me if I'm wrong. Same thing in Piemonte. If you think Barolo or Barbaresco, I don't know that there's a white wine that jumps out at you that you just right away up in that region, I love the grape Arnice, but it doesn't jump out and just right away get tied into Barolo or Barbaresco. So it's very cool that Mount Etna has this kind of white and red wine that is the signature of that region. I think that's not only cool, but I think it's going to help them a lot in growing, because people looking for whites will discover the reds, and people looking for reds will discover the whites. So I think Sicily is definitely a place, Mount Etna specifically. There's other wines from Sicily. There's other reds, there's other whites. But I would say right now, if I were to steer you to, what to try from Sicily, it would be the Etna wines, the Rosso and the Bianco. And the last thing we're going to finish it up on for this episode, when we talk about, Italian white wines, is what do we think the future of Italian white wines is for Italy? I think, as I look to the future and just me saying it earlier, white wines in general, the popularity, the amount that are being purchased and explored is growing. So inevitably you would think, well, that's going to affect Italy. The world is waking up to the incredible diversity of the Italian white wines. I mean, they just are. More producers are, experimenting and doing things, using different winemaking techniques. So I think we can expect to see even more exciting wines coming from all corners of the country of Italy. I mean, I really do. But like I said, I really think regions like Sicily and Alto Adige and Friuli, and I even think you're going to see more white wines coming out of Piemonte, some great white wines. But, that's not to say that you don't also see some of those white wines that are known around the world, and those being made in a great style as well, like Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. And that's fun to explore too. As much as I love the indigenous grapes and exploring what is from Italy and what they do with those grapes and the wines they make, sometimes it's cool to see what they can also do with a grape like Chardonnay from France, Sauvignon Blanc from France, because I can tell you, I've had some Sauvignon Blanc from Alto Adige and from Friuli that are, nothing like what you would have from Napa Valley. I mean, 180 degrees different. So I always say, when you like a grape from one area, try it in other areas as well to see, how it can be different. What can they do differently, and how can it be expressed differently in the bottle and in your glass? So that's going to wrap it up for today's episode of Italian Bottles and Bites. Appreciate you guys joining on this one. We hope to see you in the next one. And until our next episode, enjoy your next pour.